The morning sun cast harsh shadows across the training compound as Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stood at attention, her hands steady despite the chaos brewing around her. The disciplinary hearing had lasted 3 brutal hours, and now she faced the consequence that cut deeper than any reprimand could. Her rifle, the weapon that had been her constant companion through 2 tours and countless missions, lay on the metal table before Colonel Harrison like evidence of some unforgivable crime. "You are hereby stripped of your primary weapon pending review of yesterday's incident," Harrison declared, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The M4 carbine that had saved her life more times than she could count was now being placed into the hands of a junior officer, treated like contraband rather than the tool of a decorated soldier. Maya's jaw tightened imperceptibly as she watched her rifle disappear into the armory. She had customized every component, knew every scratch and modification by heart. The weapon had become an extension of herself through years of training and combat, and now she felt strangely naked without its familiar weight across her chest. But she remained silent, her dark eyes fixed straight ahead as the proceedings continued around her. The 5 soldiers lounging near the barracks entrance had been watching the entire spectacle with poorly concealed amusement. Sergeant Brooks, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks, nudged his companions and whispered something that made them all chuckle. They had never liked the way Maya carried herself with quiet confidence, the way she outshot most of them at the range, or the way their superiors seemed to respect her opinion despite her relatively small stature. "Staff Sergeant Chen, you will report to remedial combat training at 1400 hours, Colonel Harrison continued, seemingly oblivious to the brewing tension. "Your hand-to-hand combat skills will be evaluated to determine your fitness for continued active duty without a primary weapon." Maya nodded once, a sharp movement that spoke of military precision and barely contained frustration. She understood the game being played here. Someone wanted to see her fail, to prove that without her rifle she was just another small female soldier who had gotten lucky. The whispers had followed her throughout her career, suggestions that her marksmanship awards were somehow unearned or that her combat effectiveness was exaggerated in reports. As she turned to leave the administrative building, the 5 soldiers straightened from their casual positions. Brooks stepped forward slightly, his massive frame casting a shadow across the walkway. Behind him, Corporals Martinez, Johnson, Patterson, and Williams formed a loose semicircle, their expressions ranging from smug satisfaction to outright hostility. "Where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there?" This story of hidden strength and unexpected revelations connects us all across different places and moments. The afternoon heat was already building as Maya walked toward the training facilities, her boots striking the concrete with measured steps. She could feel the eyes of the 5 soldiers following her movement, could sense the predatory anticipation in their collective gaze. They thought they had finally found their moment, their chance to put her in what they considered her proper place. The mess hall buzzed with the typical afternoon chatter of soldiers unwinding between training sessions, but Maya felt the shift in atmosphere the moment she entered. Conversations died mid-sentence as heads turned in her direction, some faces showing curiosity while others displayed the kind of satisfaction that came from watching someone else's misfortune. News traveled fast on a military base, and everyone had already heard about her rifle being confiscated. Maya moved through the serving line with practiced efficiency, accepting her meal tray from the kitchen staff who offered sympathetic nods. She had always eaten alone by choice, preferring the quiet corner table near the windows where she could observe without being observed. But today felt different. Today felt like a setup. She had barely taken her first bite when Brooks and his crew approached her table. The massive sergeant pulled out the chair across from her without invitation, his bulk making the metal furniture creak ominously. Martinez and Johnson flanked her left side while Patterson and Williams blocked her right, creating a human cage around her small corner of the mess hall. Well, Brooks said loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear, "Looks like our little sharpshooter lost her security blanket." His voice carried mock concern layered with unmistakable malice. "How does it feel to be just another regular soldier now, Chen?" Maya continued eating methodically, her expression unchanged as she cut her food into precise portions. She had learned long ago that responding to provocation only escalated situations, and these men were clearly looking for a reaction. The smart play was to finish her meal and leave without giving them the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. Martinez leaned closer, his breath carrying the stale scent of tobacco and aggression. "You know what I think? I think they finally figured out you've been getting special treatment all these years. No way a little thing like you really earned all those commendations without somebody pulling strings behind the scenes." The mess hall had grown unnaturally quiet now, other soldiers sensing drama brewing at the corner table. Some watched openly while others pretended to focus on their own conversations while straining to catch every word. Maya could feel the weight of their collective attention, could sense how many of them were eager to see her brought down to what they perceived as her proper level. Johnson chimed in with his own theory, speaking just loud enough to ensure maximum audience participation. "My cousin was in Afghanistan same time as you. Said there were rumors about how you really got those kill confirmations. Said maybe you were taking credit for other people's work, using your feminine wiles to get the paperwork filed in your favor." Maya set down her fork with deliberate precision, the small metallic sound carrying surprising weight in the sudden silence. Her dark eyes moved slowly around the circle of faces surrounding her, taking inventory of each man's position and posture. She noted which ones seemed genuinely hostile versus those who were simply following Brooks' lead. She catalogued their physical advantages and weaknesses with the same clinical precision she had once used to assess enemy positions through her rifle scope. Patterson, emboldened by her silence, decided to escalate further. "Maybe we should test those hand-to-hand combat skills right here, right now. See if you're as tough without your precious rifle as you pretend to be with it. Have you ever witnessed someone surprise everyone with hidden talents? Sometimes the quietest people carry the most extraordinary skills within them." Williams nodded enthusiastically, his younger face flushed with the excitement of mob mentality. "Yeah, I bet she folds like a house of cards the second someone actually challenges her. All that tough soldier act disappears pretty quick when the playing field gets leveled." Maya stood slowly, her movements fluid and controlled despite the obvious tension crackling through the air. She picked up her tray with the same methodical precision she had used while eating, stacking her utensils neatly and ensuring nothing would spill. The 5 soldiers rose with her, their formation tightening around her like a noose drawing closed. The mess hall had transformed into an impromptu arena, with soldiers abandoning their meals to form a loose circle around the confrontation. Maya moved toward the exit with measured steps, but Brooks stepped directly into her path, his massive frame blocking her route to the door. The tray in her hands suddenly felt like the only barrier between her and an inevitable escalation. "You're not going anywhere until we settle this," Brooks declared, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to intimidating others through sheer size. His hands flexed at his sides, thick fingers curling into loose fists that spoke of countless bar fights and back-alley confrontations. The man had built his reputation on physical dominance, and Maya's quiet confidence had always been a challenge to his established order. Martinez circled to her left flank like a predator stalking wounded prey, his movements deliberate and calculated. He had been waiting for this moment ever since Maya had outscored him at the rifle range 3 months ago, embarrassing him in front of his entire unit. That humiliation had festered inside him, growing into something toxic and dangerous. The other soldiers pressed closer, forming human walls that eliminated any chance of escape. Johnson cracked his knuckles loudly, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent mess hall like gunshots. Patterson rolled his shoulders, loosening muscles that had been honed through years of manual labor before his military service. Williams bounced slightly on the balls of his feet, nervous energy radiating from his younger frame. Maya set her tray down on the nearest table with careful precision, her movements betraying no hint of the calculations running through her mind. She was rapidly assessing distances and angles, identifying potential weapons among the scattered utensils and furniture, mapping escape routes that probably no longer existed. Her training had taught her to evaluate tactical situations within seconds, and this situation was deteriorating rapidly. Brooks took another step forward, close enough now that she could smell the coffee on his breath and see the small scar above his left eyebrow. "You know what I think happened yesterday? I think you finally cracked under pressure, made some rookie mistake that got your weapon privileges revoked. And now you're gonna learn what happens when you can't hide behind superior firepower. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Maya had never discussed the details of the incident that led to her disciplinary hearing, and the official reports remained classified. But rumors had spread through the base like wildfire, each retelling more exaggerated than the last. Some claimed she had disobeyed direct orders during a training exercise. Others suggested she had endangered civilian lives during a reconnaissance mission. Martinez moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting. My buddy in intelligence says you froze up during a live fire exercise. Says you couldn't pull the trigger when it mattered, and they're using this weapon's confiscation as a face-saving way to ease you out of active duty. Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only visible sign that the words had found their target. She had spent years proving herself in a profession dominated by men who questioned her every achievement, and the suggestion that she had shown cowardice under fire struck at the core of her identity as a soldier. Johnson stepped forward from her right side, emboldened by her silence. Maybe it's time someone taught you what real combat looks like when you can't just pick people off from a distance like some kind of video game. The circle tightened around Maya like a noose drawing closed, each man positioning himself to cut off any possible escape route. The mess hall had fallen into an eerie silence broken only by the soft scraping of chairs as other soldiers pushed back from their tables to get a better view. Some faces showed anticipation while others displayed the uncomfortable expression of witnesses who knew they were about to see something they would rather avoid. Patterson cracked his neck with a sharp pop that echoed through the tension-filled space. He had been lifting weights obsessively for the past 6 months, adding bulk to his already impressive frame in preparation for Special Forces selection. Maya's small stature made her seem like the perfect target to demonstrate his newfound strength and fighting prowess. Brooks raised his hand slightly, a gesture that commanded immediate attention from his 4 companions. The big man had orchestrated this confrontation carefully, choosing the mess hall because it provided maximum audience with minimal risk of immediate intervention from officers. Most of the commissioned personnel ate at different hours, leaving the enlisted soldiers to police themselves. Before we begin, let's make sure everyone understands what's happening here, Brooks announced loudly enough for the entire room to hear. Staff Sergeant Chen seems to think her reputation as a marksman makes her some kind of elite warrior. We're about to find out if that reputation holds up when the playing field gets leveled. Maya's breathing remained steady and controlled, but her muscles had begun the subtle shift from relaxed readiness to combat preparation. Her weight settled slightly forward onto the balls of her feet, a nearly invisible adjustment that spoke of countless hours of hand-to-hand combat training. The observers might not notice the change, but her body was transitioning into a different mode entirely. Martinez stepped closer from her left side, his voice carrying mock sympathy. You know what the problem is with snipers? They never learn how to fight up close and personal. They spend all their time hiding in the bushes, picking off targets from a safe distance. But real warriors look their enemies in the eye when they take them down. The accusation sparked murmurs from the watching soldiers. Some nodded in agreement, having long harbored resentment toward the specialized marksmen who seemed to avoid the brutal close-quarters combat that defined infantry warfare. Others shifted uncomfortably, recognizing that the situation was escalating beyond mere verbal harassment into something potentially dangerous. Johnson moved to fill the gap on Maya's right flank, his movements telegraphing his intention to grab her arm. He had always been the most impulsive of Brooks' followers, the first to escalate verbal confrontations into physical ones. His eagerness to prove himself often overrode whatever tactical sense he might have possessed. Williams circled behind her like a pack animal moving to surround wounded prey. The youngest of the 5, he had something to prove to his older companions and saw Maya as the perfect opportunity to demonstrate his loyalty to their informal brotherhood. His hands trembled slightly with nervous energy and anticipation. Maya's dark eyes moved systematically around the circle, cataloging each man's position with the same precision she had once used to calculate bullet trajectory and wind resistance. Patterson at 2 o'clock, favoring his right side due to an old shoulder injury. Martinez at 10 o'clock, standing with his weight too far forward in his eagerness to close distance. Johnson at 3 o'clock, telegraphing his intentions through poor stance and obvious preparation. Williams at 6 o'clock, nervous energy making him shift weight constantly. And Brooks directly in front of her, confident in his size advantage but overcommit to his aggressive posture. The first move came from Johnson, his impatience finally overriding whatever tactical sense Brooks had tried to instill in his followers. He lunged forward with his right hand extended toward Maya's shoulder, intending to grab her and demonstrate the physical dominance that had served him well in countless bar fights back home. His movement was telegraphed and clumsy, driven more by ego than technique. Maya's response was instantaneous and surgical. She pivoted left on her back foot, allowing Johnson's momentum to carry him past her while simultaneously driving her right elbow upward into his solar plexus. The impact drove the air from his lungs in a sharp wheeze that echoed through the silent mess hall. Before he could recover, her left hand snapped forward in a precise strike to his throat that sent him stumbling backward, gasping and clutching his neck. The entire exchange lasted less than 3 seconds, but it shattered the confident atmosphere that Brooks had worked so hard to cultivate. The watching soldiers leaned forward in their chairs, suddenly realizing they were witnessing something far different than the one-sided beatdown they had expected. Maya moved with a fluidity that spoke of training far beyond standard military hand-to-hand combat certification. Martinez reacted next, his anger at being upstaged overriding his caution. He charged from her left side with both arms extended, attempting to tackle her around the waist in a move that had served him well during high school wrestling. But Maya was no longer where he expected her to be. She had already shifted her weight and rotated away from his approach, using his own momentum against him. Her right knee came up in a devastating arc that caught Martinez in the ribs as he passed, the impact producing a sharp crack that made several observers wince visibly. He folded around the strike like a jackknife, his forward momentum carrying him face first into a nearby table. Plates and utensils scattered across the floor with a crash that punctuated his groaning collapse. What would you do if you were in this situation? Sometimes we all face moments when we must reveal our true strength to protect ourselves. Brooks bellowed in rage and confusion, his carefully orchestrated plan disintegrating before his eyes. The big man charged forward like an angry bull, his massive fists swinging in wide arcs that would have crushed anyone unfortunate enough to be caught in their path. But Maya had already anticipated his attack, recognizing that his size advantage came with corresponding disadvantages in speed and agility. She dropped low beneath his first swing, the massive fist passing inches above her head with enough force to have knocked her unconscious. Her left hand shot forward in a lightning-fast strike to his knee, targeting the pressure point that would temporarily disable his leg. Brooks roared in pain and surprise as his knee buckled, sending him stumbling sideways into Patterson, who was attempting his own attack from the right. Patterson had been moving in with calculated precision, his months of weight training giving him confidence in his ability to overpower the smaller woman. But Maya's strike against Brooks had created an unexpected collision that disrupted his timing and balance. Before he could recover, Maya had already pivoted to face him directly. Her right hand moved in a blur, striking his wrist with surgical precision and causing him to drop his guard involuntarily. The follow-up was immediate and devastating, a left-hand strike to his temple that sent him reeling backward into the wall. He slid down the painted concrete surface like a broken marionette, his eyes unfocused and glassy. Williams, the youngest and least experienced of the five, found himself suddenly alone and facing a woman who had just dismantled 4 larger opponents in less than 30 seconds. His nervous energy had transformed into pure terror as he realized that everything they thought they knew about Maya Chen had been catastrophically wrong. Williams backed against the wall with his hands raised defensively, his youthful bravado evaporating like morning mist under the harsh reality of what he had just witnessed. The cocky soldier who had been so eager to prove himself moments earlier now faced the terrifying realization that he was alone against someone whose combat skills far exceeded anything he had encountered in basic training or deployment exercises. Maya turned toward him with the fluid grace of a predator, her breathing still controlled and even despite having just disabled 4 larger opponents. Her dark eyes held no emotion, no anger or satisfaction, only the cold calculation of someone trained to eliminate threats with maximum efficiency. Williams could see his own fear reflected in those eyes and understood that he was facing a level of professional violence that his small-town upbringing had never prepared him for. "Please," Williams stammered, his voice cracking like an adolescent despite his 22 years. "I didn't mean anything by it. This was all Brooks' idea. I was just following along." His back pressed against the painted concrete wall as if he could somehow melt through it and escape the approaching nightmare. Maya's response was swift and merciless. She closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps, her left hand shooting forward to pin his throat against the wall while her right hand struck his solar plexus with precisely calculated force. Williams doubled over around the impact, his breath leaving him in a rushing gasp that echoed through the silent mess hall. Before he could fall, Maya's knee came up in a controlled arc that caught him in the sternum, straightening him up against the wall again. Her final strike was a ridge hand to the side of his neck that targeted the carotid artery, cutting off blood flow to his brain for just long enough to send him sliding unconsciously down the wall to join his companions on the floor. The entire confrontation had lasted exactly 83 seconds from Johnson's first aggressive move to Williams' final collapse. The mess hall remained frozen in stunned silence as soldiers struggled to process what they had just witnessed. Maya Chen, the quiet marksman they had dismissed as just another female soldier trading on her shooting skills, had just systematically dismantled 5 larger opponents with a display of hand-to-hand combat expertise that bordered on the superhuman. Have you ever seen someone reveal hidden depths that completely changed how you viewed them? Sometimes the most powerful people are those who choose to remain quiet until action is required. Brooks groaned from his position on the floor, his massive frame curled around his damaged knee as he tried to comprehend how his carefully planned humiliation had turned into his own devastating defeat. Through the haze of pain and confusion, he caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. As Maya had moved during the fight, her uniform sleeve had ridden up slightly, revealing a tattoo on her forearm that he had never noticed before. The tattoo was small and discreet, easily hidden by regulation sleeves during normal duty. But now, in the aftermath of combat, it was partially visible. A stylized skull wearing a green beret, surrounded by wings and crossed weapons. Below it, in tiny letters that Brooks could barely make out from his position on the floor, were the words that sent ice water through his veins. Maya straightened her uniform with the same methodical precision she had used throughout the confrontation, her movements betraying no hint of exertion or emotional reaction to what had just transpired. She looked around the circle of unconscious or groaning soldiers with the dispassionate assessment of a professional warrior cataloging the results of a successful engagement. The watching soldiers began to murmur among themselves, their voices hushed and filled with a mixture of awe and fear. Word was already beginning to spread through the mess hall about what they had witnessed, and Maya knew that within hours the entire base would know about the confrontation and its unexpected outcome. The mess hall doors burst open with a force that sent them crashing against the walls, the sound echoing through the stunned silence like gunshots. Master Sergeant Rebecca Torres strode into the room with the purposeful gait of someone accustomed to command, her eyes immediately scanning the scene of devastation that greeted her. 5 soldiers lay scattered across the floor in various states of consciousness while Maya stood in the center like the eye of a hurricane that had already passed. Torres had heard the commotion from her office 3 buildings away, the unusual silence followed by scattered shouts drawing her attention like a distress signal. As the senior non-commissioned officer responsible for this section of the base, disturbances in the mess hall fell directly under her jurisdiction. But nothing in her 20-year military career had prepared her for the scene that now confronted her. "What in the hell happened here?" Torres demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned her stripes through deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. Her gaze swept across the fallen soldiers, cataloging injuries and assessing the tactical situation with the practiced eye of a combat veteran. Johnson clutched his throat while gasping for air. Martinez remained folded over a table, groaning softly. Patterson sat slumped against the wall with unfocused eyes. Williams lay unconscious at the base of the wall. Brooks writhed on the floor, favoring his damaged knee. Maya came to attention with parade ground precision, her uniform somehow still crisp and properly arranged despite the violent encounter that had just concluded. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen reporting the conclusion of a physical altercation, Master Sergeant. 5 soldiers attempted to initiate unauthorized combat engagement. I defended myself using appropriate force. Torres moved closer, her experienced eye noting details that the other observers had missed. Maya's breathing remained controlled and steady. Her stance showed no signs of fatigue or injury. Her uniform bore no tears or dishevelment that would indicate a prolonged struggle. Most telling of all, her hands showed no signs of the swelling or bruising that typically accompanied hand-to-hand combat encounters. 5 against 1, Torres observed, her tone carefully neutral as she processed the implications. And you're telling me they all ended up on the floor while you remained standing and uninjured? Her eyes narrowed slightly as professional curiosity overcame her initial shock. That's quite an impressive defensive capability for a marksman specialist. The watching soldiers held their collective breath, sensing that something significant was about to be revealed. Torres had begun to circle Maya slowly, her movements resembling those of a predator evaluating potential prey or competition. But there was something else in her expression, a growing recognition that suggested she was beginning to piece together information that others lacked. Maya remained at attention, her eyes fixed straight ahead as military protocol demanded. But Torres could see the subtle signs of advanced combat training in her posture and bearing, details that spoke of instruction far beyond standard infantry preparation. The way she distributed her weight, the positioning of her hands, the controlled breathing that indicated someone trained to manage adrenaline and stress responses under extreme conditions. You know what strikes me as interesting, Chen, Torres said as she completed her circle and came to stand directly in front of Maya. These boys are all bigger than you, all younger than you, and all convinced they could take you in a fair fight. Yet here they are, scattered across my mess hall like broken toys while you stand here without a scratch on you. Maya's expression remained carefully neutral, but Torres caught the almost imperceptible tightening around her eyes that suggested internal conflict. The Master Sergeant had seen that look before, usually on the faces of operators who were struggling with classification restrictions and operational security requirements that prevented them from revealing their true capabilities or background. This reminds us that everyone has hidden depths and that we should never underestimate people based on appearances or assumptions about their capabilities. Torres knelt beside Brooks, who was still clutching his damaged knee and struggling to focus through the haze of pain. The big sergeant's face had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead as he tried to comprehend how his carefully planned confrontation had turned into such a complete disaster. His eyes kept darting between Maya and the partially visible tattoo on her forearm that had filled him with inexplicable dread. Brooks, Torres said sharply, her voice cutting through his confusion like a blade. You want to explain to me how 5 experienced soldiers ended up on the floor after picking a fight with one woman half your size? Her tone carried the weight of someone who had seen enough combat to recognize the difference between lucky punches and professional violence. Brooks opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again as his gaze fixed on Maya's forearm where her sleeve had shifted during the confrontation. The tattoo that had caught his attention was now more visible, and what he saw there made his stomach lurch with the sick realization of a catastrophic mistake. The stylized skull and crossed weapons were unmistakable symbols within certain military communities. She's not, Brooks stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. His face had gone from pale to ashen as the full implications of what he was seeing began to penetrate his pain-clouded mind. The tattoo represented something that existed in whispered conversations and classified briefings, something that most soldiers never encountered directly. Torres followed Brooks' horrified gaze to Maya's forearm, her own expression shifting from professional curiosity to growing recognition. As a 20-year veteran with multiple combat deployments, she had learned to recognize the signs of specialized training when she encountered them. Maya's performance in the mess hall had been too precise, too controlled, too devastatingly effective to be the result of standard military combat instruction. Chen, Torres said slowly, her voice taking on a different quality as pieces of a larger puzzle began to fall into place. I think we need to have a conversation about your actual military occupational specialty. Her eyes remained fixed on the partially visible tattoo that was causing Brooks such obvious distress. Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only sign that she was struggling with competing obligations. Military protocol demanded that she respond to direct questions from superior officers, but operational security requirements often superseded normal chain of command considerations. She found herself caught between conflicting loyalties and regulations that were never designed to intersect in situations like this. The watching soldiers sensed that they were witnessing something significant, though most lacked the knowledge to understand what they were seeing. Conversations had resumed throughout the mess hall, but they were conducted in hushed tones that spoke of people processing information that challenged their basic assumptions about the world around them. Johnson had finally recovered enough breath to sit up against a nearby chair, his hand still rubbing his bruised throat where Maya's precise strike had temporarily incapacitated him. Like his companions, he was beginning to realize that they had stumbled into something far beyond their understanding or ability to handle. Martinez remained doubled over the table, his ribs aching where Maya's knee had found its target with surgical precision. Through his pain and confusion, he was starting to remember fragments of conversations he had overheard in intelligence briefings, references to units and operations that existed in the shadows of official military structure. Torres moved closer to Maya, her experienced eye cataloging details that spoke of training far beyond anything available through normal military channels. The woman's posture and bearing suggested someone accustomed to operating under extreme stress, someone trained to eliminate threats with maximum efficiency and minimum exposure. "You know what I think happened here," Torres continued, her voice carrying the weight of growing certainty. "I think these boys picked a fight with someone they should have left alone. Someone whose actual capabilities are significantly different from what appears in her official personnel file." The mess hall doors opened again, this time admitting Colonel Harrison himself, flanked by two military police officers whose presence immediately elevated the tension in the already charged atmosphere. Harrison's face bore the expression of a man who had been pulled away from important business to deal with what he had expected to be a routine disciplinary matter involving unruly enlisted personnel. His stride faltered slightly as he took in the scene before him. 5 soldiers in various states of recovery scattered across the floor like casualties from a training accident, while Maya Chen stood at perfect attention in the center of what appeared to be a combat zone. The colonel's experienced eye immediately recognized that whatever had transpired here was far more significant than a simple mess hall altercation. "Master Sergeant Torres," Harrison said sharply, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate and complete obedience. "What exactly happened in my mess hall, and why are 5 of my soldiers requiring medical attention?" His gaze swept across the scene with the practiced assessment of a career officer who had learned to extract truth from chaos. Torres came to attention, her own military bearing reflecting years of experience dealing with superior officers who demanded precise and complete information. "Sir, there was a physical altercation involving these 5 soldiers and Staff Sergeant Chen. The soldiers initiated unauthorized combat engagement. Chen defended herself using what appears to be advanced hand-to-hand combat techniques." Harrison's expression shifted from irritation to intense interest as he processed the implications of Torres' report. His eyes moved from the defeated soldiers to Maya, who remained at rigid attention despite being the center of an increasingly complex situation. Something in her posture and bearing triggered a memory from classified briefings he had attended earlier in his career. "Chen," Harrison said slowly, his voice taking on a different quality as professional curiosity overcame his initial anger. "Step forward and show me that tattoo on your forearm." His tone suggested that he suspected what he might see there, but needed visual confirmation to believe it. Maya hesitated for a fraction of a second, her training warring with the direct order from a superior officer. Operational security protocols were clear about revealing identifying marks or unit affiliations in public settings, but refusing a direct order from a colonel would create even larger problems. She stepped forward and slowly rolled up her sleeve to reveal the tattoo that had terrified Brooks. The stylized skull wearing a green beret seemed to glow under the harsh fluorescent lights of the mess hall. Crossed weapons formed an X beneath the skull, while wings spread from either side in a design that spoke of death delivered from above. Below the imagery, in small but perfectly legible script, were the words that made Harrison's face go pale with recognition and understanding. "Task Force Reaper," Harrison read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon, carrying implications that most of the watching soldiers could not fully comprehend. Those who did understand felt ice water replace the blood in their veins as they realized what they had just witnessed. Maya remained at attention, her expression carefully neutral despite the breach of operational security that was now occurring in front of dozens of witnesses. Task Force Reaper existed in the shadows of military operations, conducting missions that never appeared in official reports or public records. Members were selected from the most elite units across all branches of service. Brooks made a choking sound from his position on the floor, finally understanding why Maya's combat performance had seemed almost superhuman. Task Force Reaper operators underwent training that pushed human capabilities to their absolute limits, creating soldiers who could function as one-person armies when circumstances required it. Colonel Harrison stared at the tattoo for several long seconds, his mind racing through classified briefings and operational reports that suddenly took on new meaning. Task Force Reaper operators were legends within military intelligence circles, ghosts who appeared in after-action reports but never in official personnel rosters. The idea that one had been stationed at his base under standard cover credentials was both thrilling and terrifying. "Chen," Harrison said, his voice now carrying a mixture of respect and barely controlled excitement. "You're telling me that a Tier 1 operator has been serving under my command as a simple marksman specialist?" His eyes moved from the tattoo to Maya's face, searching for confirmation of what he already knew to be true. Maya's expression remained carefully neutral, but she could see the wheels turning in Harrison's mind as he began to understand the implications. Her cover identity as a standard infantry marksman had been compromised the moment she had been forced to defend herself using skills far beyond anything taught in conventional military training programs. The watching soldiers had gone completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something that would reshape their understanding of military operations and the people who conducted them. Even those who didn't recognize the specific significance of Task Force Reaper could tell from Harrison's reaction that they had stumbled into something extraordinary. "Sir," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying the controlled tone of someone trained to manage classified information under pressure. "My assignment here was temporary administrative duty pending resolution of operational matters. The weapon confiscation was part of maintaining cover protocols during the transitional period." Harrison nodded slowly, pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place in his mind. The disciplinary hearing that had seemed so routine now revealed itself as elaborate security theater designed to maintain Maya's cover identity while she awaited new orders. Her rifle hadn't been confiscated as punishment, but rather to prevent questions about why a simple marksman carried weapons modified far beyond standard specifications. Brooks groaned from his position on the floor, the sound carrying a note of existential horror as he realized that he and his companions had attempted to intimidate and assault one of the most dangerous soldiers in the entire military. Task Force Reaper members were selected for their ability to eliminate entire enemy squads single-handedly, making their confrontation with Maya not brave or foolish, but suicidal. What would you do if you discovered that someone you had completely underestimated was actually one of the most elite warriors in the world? Torres stepped forward, her own military bearing reflecting new understanding of the situation. "Sir, I recommend immediate medical evaluation for these 5 soldiers, followed by comprehensive debriefing regarding operational security protocols. This incident could have serious implications for ongoing classified operations." Harrison nodded grimly, already calculating the damage control measures that would be required. Maya's cover had been blown in the most public way possible, witnessed by dozens of enlisted personnel who would inevitably spread the story throughout the base. The operational security breach alone would require investigation by military intelligence. Martinez finally managed to straighten up from the table where he had been recovering, his face pale with the realization of how close he and his companions had come to potentially fatal consequences. Maya had clearly held back during their confrontation, using precisely the minimum force necessary to neutralize threats without causing permanent damage. Johnson touched his bruised throat gingerly, understanding now why Maya's strikes had been so devastatingly effective. Every move she had made during the 83-second engagement had been calculated with surgical precision, designed to incapacitate without killing. Against trained enemy combatants, those same techniques would have been lethal. Patterson slumped against the wall, his head still ringing from the strike that had temporarily scrambled his consciousness. The casual efficiency with which Maya had dismantled their attack now revealed itself as the restrained performance of someone capable of far more violent solutions to the problem they had presented. The mess hall had transformed into an impromptu command center as Harrison began issuing orders with the rapid-fire precision of a career officer managing a crisis. The military police officers flanking him moved to secure the perimeter, ensuring that no unauthorized personnel could enter or leave until the operational security situation had been properly assessed and contained. "Torres, I want these 5 soldiers isolated for debriefing immediately," Harrison commanded, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood the gravity of what had just occurred. "No communication with other personnel until intelligence can determine the extent of this security breach." His eyes swept across the defeated soldiers with a mixture of anger and concern. Maya remained at attention, her expression carefully neutral despite the chaos swirling around her. Years of specialized training had prepared her for operational security compromises, but few scenarios had involved such a public and dramatic revelation of her true capabilities. The cover identity that had taken months to establish was now completely destroyed. Brooks struggled to sit up against a nearby table, his damaged knee making movement difficult and painful. Through the haze of physical discomfort, he was beginning to understand the enormous mistake he and his companions had made. They had not simply lost a fight, they had potentially compromised ongoing national security operations through their ignorant aggression. "Sir," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying the controlled tone of someone trained to manage classified information under extreme pressure. "I request permission to contact my operational handler regarding this incident. There may be mission-critical implications that require immediate attention from higher command levels." Harrison nodded grimly, already calculating the cascade of consequences that would flow from this single incident. Maya's cover identity was irreparably compromised, which meant that whatever mission had brought her to his base would need to be reassessed or abandoned entirely. The ripple effects could potentially impact ongoing operations across multiple theaters. The watching soldiers had been reduced to stunned silence, their understanding of military hierarchy and capability permanently altered by what they had witnessed. Many of them had served multiple deployments and considered themselves experienced combat veterans, yet none had ever seen hand-to-hand combat performed with such devastating precision and control. Martinez finally managed to speak, his voice hoarse with pain and disbelief. "We didn't know," he whispered, the words carrying the weight of someone grappling with the magnitude of their error. "Nobody told us she was special operations. We thought she was just another marksman trying to act tough." Harrison's expression hardened as he processed the implications of Martinez's statement. The fact that a Task Force Reaper operator had been stationed at his base without his knowledge raised serious questions about operational command structure and information sharing between different levels of military hierarchy. "Chen," Harrison said, his voice now carrying a note of professional respect that had been absent during their earlier interactions. "I owe you an apology for the weapon confiscation hearing. I was clearly operating with incomplete information about your actual status and mission parameters." Maya's jaw tightened slightly, the only visible sign of the emotions she was struggling to control. The elaborate security theater that had surrounded her rifle confiscation had been designed to maintain her cover, but it had also subjected her to genuine humiliation and professional doubt that cut deeper than physical injuries. Have you ever seen someone receive the recognition they truly deserved after being underestimated and misjudged? Torres stepped forward, her own understanding of the situation continuing to evolve as she processed new information. "Sir, I recommend immediate restoration of Chen's weapon privileges and full operational authority pending contact with her chain of command. Continuing the administrative charade at this point serves no purpose and may actually compromise security further." Williams had finally regained consciousness, his head clearing enough to focus on the conversation taking place around him. The youngest of the 5 attackers, he was struggling to comprehend how his attempt to prove himself to his older companions had resulted in assault on one of the military's most elite operators. 3 hours later, Maya stood in Colonel Harrison's office as he personally returned her customized M4 carbine, the weapon gleaming under the overhead lights like a sacred relic being restored to its rightful owner. The rifle felt familiar and reassuring in her hands after the enforced separation, every modification and personal touch exactly as she had left it before the elaborate security theater had begun. Staff Sergeant Chen, Harrison said formally, his voice carrying the weight of official recognition and personal respect. On behalf of this command, I apologize for the operational security measures that required your temporary disarmament. Your cover identity and mission parameters have been fully restored with my complete understanding and support. Maya accepted the rifle with the reverence of a professional warrior reunited with an essential tool of her trade. The weapon represented far more than mere firepower, it was a symbol of trust and capability that had been temporarily stripped away as part of maintaining her fictional disciplinary status. Having it back felt like reclaiming a piece of her identity. The 5 soldiers who had confronted her in the mess hall were currently undergoing extensive debriefing with military intelligence officers, their aggressive stupidity having earned them a crash course in operational security protocols and the consequences of interfering with classified missions. Brooks, Martinez, Johnson, Patterson, and Williams would spend the next several weeks learning exactly how close they had come to creating an international incident. Word of the confrontation had spread throughout the base with the speed of wildfire, but the official story being disseminated focused on a training accident rather than the dramatic revelation of Maya's true identity. Most personnel would never know they had been sharing quarters with one of the military's most elite operators, though rumors and whispered conversations would persist for years. Maya's operational handler had been contacted immediately following the incident, resulting in a flurry of encrypted communications between various levels of command as her mission status was reassessed. The compromise of her cover identity necessitated immediate extraction and reassignment to a different operational theater where her face and capabilities remained unknown. Torres entered the office carrying Maya's personnel file, now updated with her actual service record and operational history. The document painted a picture of someone whose capabilities far exceeded anything that appeared in standard military databases, a ghost warrior whose true achievements would never be publicly acknowledged or celebrated. Chen, Torres said with genuine respect, it has been an honor serving alongside you, even if we didn't understand who you really were. Your dedication to maintaining cover identity even under extreme provocation demonstrates the highest levels of professional commitment and operational discipline. Share this story with someone who needs to understand that we should never judge others based on appearances or assumptions about their capabilities. Maya nodded acknowledgement, her expression softening slightly as she prepared to return to the shadow world of classified operations and denied missions. The temporary assignment to Harrison's base had provided a brief respite from the constant pressure of Tier 1 operations, but that interlude was now ending as dramatically as it had begun. Harrison stepped forward to shake her hand, a gesture that carried the weight of one professional warrior acknowledging another. Your service record speaks for itself, Chen. This country is fortunate to have operators like you willing to serve in the shadows without recognition or public appreciation. As Maya prepared to leave the office and return to her clandestine world, she reflected on the strange turn of events that had brought her true identity into the light. The 5 soldiers who had attacked her would carry the memory of their defeat for the rest of their lives, a reminder that appearances could be devastatingly deceiving and that respect should never be withheld based on size, gender, or assumptions about capability. The mess hall incident would become legend within certain military circles, whispered about in training facilities and operational briefings as a cautionary tale about underestimating quiet professionals who chose to let their actions speak louder than their words. Maya Chen had reminded everyone that the most dangerous warriors were often those who appeared most unassuming until circumstances forced them to reveal their true nature.